Buddy and the man, his stance protective and unwavering. The biker sneered, unfazed by the fury in Keanu's gaze. Just teaching that mutt some manners, he scoffed. Dogs don't belong at tables like people. Before he could say another word, Keanu took a deliberate step forward, his jaw clenched tight. "That's so," he said, his voice calm, but laced with unmistakable intensity. His reputation for kindness and humility was well known, but in this moment, there was no mistaking the steel behind his words. "You think it's fun to kick an innocent dog for no reason?" The patio had gone silent, all eyes fixed on the brewing confrontation. Maggie, the waitress, stood frozen, a tray still in her hands, while Buddy let out a low warning growl. The biker shifted slightly, perhaps realizing he had made a mistake, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You got a problem with that?" He challenged, his voice cocky, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Keanu exhaled, slowly shaking his head. "You don't mess with a man's dog," he said simply. Then, without another word, he removed his wallet and tossed a few bills onto the table. "Take care of Buddy for me for a second," he told Maggie before turning his full attention back to the biker. The man scoffed. "Oh, what you gonna do, movie star?" he taunted. "You gonna fight me like in your little action flicks?" Keanu didn't answer. He just took another step forward, closing the distance between them. His presence alone was enough to make the biker hesitate. For the first time, Keanu wasn't just an actor. He was a man who had seen enough of the world to know when a line had been crossed. The biker shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how many people were watching him, realizing he was no longer in control of the situation. Then, from the edge of the patio, another voice cut through the air. "I'd back off if I were you." The biker turned his head only to see several of the other patrons rising from their seats, some of them fellow bikers who had been friendly to Buddy earlier. One of them, the tattooed man from the water fountain, crossed his arms over his chest and gave the troublemaker a knowing look. "That's Keanu Reeves, man, and you just kicked his dog. Do you have any idea how that ends?" The biker's face paled slightly as the weight of the situation settled on him. He took a step back, his bravado crumbling. "Whatever, man," he muttered. "I don't need this." He turned on his heel and stalked away, shoving his way past the tables. As the tension slowly ebbed from the air, a collective breath was released around the patio. Keanu knelt beside Buddy, gently checking him over, making sure he was okay. Buddy nudged his hand reassuringly, as if to say he was fine. Keanu gave him a small smile, scratching behind his ears. "You're tougher than you look, huh?" Maggie let out a relieved sigh, placing a fresh plate of steak down in front of Buddy. "On the house," she said with a small smile. Keanu nodded his thanks before settling back into his seat. The mood slowly returned to normal, the murmur of conversation picking back up around them. As people recounted what had just happened, Keanu took a sip of his coffee, glancing down at Buddy, who was now happily munching on his well-earned meal. "Guess we both worked up an appetite, huh?" Buddy wagged his tail in response, and with that their quiet afternoon continued as if nothing had happened, though everyone at that cafe and beyond would remember one thing: don't mess with a man's dog, especially if that man is Keanu Reeves. That easy when you're dealing with guys like that. Keanu nodded in understanding, his gaze drifting in the direction the biker had disappeared. He had dealt with bullies before, both on and off the screen, but something about this particular group unsettled him. There was an edge to them, a sense that they weren't just looking for trouble, they were trouble. Maggie hesitated before speaking again, lowering her voice even more. "That insignia on his vest?" she murmured. "They call themselves the Iron Fangs. They've been stirring up problems all over this part of Brooklyn. Protection rackets, threats, you name it." She sighed, frustrated. "Most people just try to stay out of their way." Keanu took a slow, measured sip of his coffee, his mind working through what Maggie had just told him. So this wasn't just some random thug picking a fight, this was bigger, and that meant there was a chance the trouble wasn't over. "Well," Keanu said, finally setting his cup down and glancing at Buddy, "if they think they can intimidate everyone, they might just find out some people aren't so easy to scare." Maggie studied him for a moment, then smiled despite herself. "Something tells me you're not just talking about yourself," she said, glancing at Buddy, who had settled back down, his tail thumping lazily against the chair. Keanu chuckled. "Let's just say we both know how to handle ourselves." He reached down, scratching Buddy behind the ears, the tension in his shoulders easing just a little. "And we're not running from anyone." Still, even as the moment passed and the cafe returned to its usual rhythm, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that today's confrontation was just the beginning.